Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Happy New Year. Happy Chinese New Year. We are starting off 2025 looking at the importance of on-the-ground presence in China. We appreciate you all taking the time to join us, whether it's live or watching this on replay. For this very important discussion on how you can choose between an employer of record service and establishing an entity in China. Now, global interest in the Chinese market is continuing to grow, although we do know that there are political factors that are existing today, and it is tumultuous to say the least. But today we're going to be focusing on the crucial factor for success, which is establishing an on-the-ground presence. We'll explore the options available to companies, namely utilizing an employer of record service versus establishing a formal business entity. And through this presentation, we hope that you will all gain valuable insights that will help you to make informed decisions regarding your company's expansion strategy into China. Before we start today's presentation, allow me just to briefly introduce who we are. Woodburn Accountants and Advisors is one of China and Hong Kong's most trusted business setup and corporate administration advisory firms. We are specialized in inbound investment into both of these jurisdictions, China and Hong Kong. We have been doing this since 1979, when my father established the company at that time. Our goal is to eliminate the bureaucratic complexities that exist around corporate administration in China, trying to find the best business model that fits a company looking to grow and expand in the region. Our services range from, again, pre-investment advisory, all the way through to trademark registrations, employer of record services, company establishment, and then all the ongoing administrative services that pertain to managing an entity in China as well as in Hong Kong. Our goal is to tailor-make these solutions based on a client's objectives, goals, needs, or even the obstacles that they encounter along the way. And if you're interested in learning more about what we do, just head on over to our website, woodburnglobal.com. A little bit about myself. My name is Christina Kohler-Colucci. I'm the head of business advisory at Woodburn Accountants and Advisors. I have been dealing with inbound investment into China for over 22 years now, specifically on China, but also managing Hong Kong as well. I've helped over 850 companies across a variety of industries, a variety of sectors, with their market entry strategies, business model creations, and then ultimately the implementation of those business models, and helping then the companies to focus on growth and scale by managing all of the administrative processes that are involved in that. I encourage you all to connect with me on WeChat. Alternatively, if you've got any questions throughout this presentation, we will have a Q&A at the end, but email me, Christina@woodburnglobal.com. You can also set up a call with me. I'd love to speak to you about what you're looking to do in China. So let's get cracking with today's presentation, which again is the importance of having on-the-ground presence in China, choosing between an employer of record service and establishing a business entity. We all know that coming into the Chinese market is daunting. There are language barriers, there are cultural barriers. With the political tumultuous situation that we're all in, there are also geopolitical barriers that are coming in. But it does not mean that China is not in the sights of companies in terms of market entry and ultimately growing there. China does represent one of the largest consumer markets in the world, with obviously a rapidly expanding middle class and a vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystem as well. And because of this, companies from around the world are eager to tap into this potential. However, successfully entering this market isn't simply a matter of setting up a website or launching a marketing campaign. It really does require a nuanced understanding of local customs, regulations, and consumer behavior. A local presence allows companies to navigate these complexities more effectively. Now, what I do want to highlight here is I completely understand that nowadays people are on a budget. People are careful with how they're spending their money, and they will probably say to me, Christina, we're just going to delegate and hand over the startup of this business to distributors, to TP partners, and they will just manage everything. And if they reach a certain, I don't know, trigger, like a revenue value or an inventory value, or they're just finding that there are weaknesses in that business model, then they will decide whether they need to hire people or they will have to establish an entity. I understand that starting point. However, I just want to reiterate that you cannot be as effective as you want to be in China by delegating. Okay? It is a starting point. But don't forget that you are paying then service fees to these companies to kick off your business. And you are also handing them the knowledge that ultimately you should be gaining by starting off. Okay. So keep all of this in mind, because I think the tendency for a lot of companies is just to delegate as an easy way to start off, which I totally agree with. But it does not mean that you cannot establish some type of control and security methods in order to be able to observe, control, and make sure that these parties are doing the right thing for your company. So in the next few slides, we're going to define and compare employer of record services and the establishment of a business entity. We're going to detail the respective advantages, the challenges, the specific contexts in which each would be more beneficial. Okay. And ultimately, this is my opinion after 22 years of doing this. Those that have jumped the gun and gone immediately of having an on-the-ground presence, observing, supervising, giving feedback based on what these third parties are doing, has been fundamentally the reason why these types of companies grow faster in the market and scale faster in the market, add new product lines in the market compared to other companies who just delegate and occasionally look up reports, generally every quarter period. All right. So let's get cracking to the need of the on-the-ground presence. So establishing a local presence in China, in my opinion, is essential for these 4 reasons. Firstly, having personnel on the ground enables access to invaluable market insights and local expertise. You might then say, well, the personnel by the distributors or the personnel sitting with the TPs that are employed by the TPs, they have very different goals and objectives. Their goals are to maintain you as a client. Their goal is not necessarily to build up your business at the scale and speed that you would like to build it at. So make sure you're looking at what the goals are and objectives. It's generally not a win-win situation for everyone, right? And all you're seeing is you paying higher service fees to them versus having somebody on the ground who watches over them daily. And obviously, having somebody on the ground helps you to understand consumer behaviors, understand consumer preferences. It's having somebody on the ground who can actually go to retail outlets, talk to consumers personally about what their wishes, needs, wants are, and they can observe immediately the significant variety across the regions within China. Secondly, it's the regulatory landscape, which can be daunting, and local personnel help navigate this basically by ensuring compliance with the laws, making sure that if you are an industry which requires specific product certification or there are new changes to the product categories that you're dealing with, that you are dealing with that immediately versus hoping that those third parties are going to mention something in a timely fashion. And don't forget, these things are changing um, you know, quickly, rapidly, daily. So you do want somebody on the ground who is on your side observing all of this. Thirdly, establishing strong relationships, right? What we all know as guanxi, is the key to having a successful business operation versus you sitting a 12-hour flight away and hoping that you get in touch with people in the correct time zone. And although we are all extremely familiar with Zoom and how Zoom operates, or Microsoft Teams operates, or how WeChat operates, nothing can build more confidence or can put pressure on a third party than asking for a face-to-face meeting the next day. So these local representatives that you have on the ground are there to nurture these connections more effectively than remote teams, but they are also there to put pressure to make sure that they are doing the jobs that they have to do in order to be able to grow and scale. And lastly, a local presence just streamlines operations. And ultimately, this means having effective coordination of logistics, suppliers, internal teams, third-party distributors or TPs, or wholesale distributors as well. It's basically having these people respond to the market shifts efficiently, swiftly, immediately, within the next day, versus hanging around. We all know that when you are sitting in the headquarters, you are probably dealing with a team that isn't solely focused on China, but might be an international team of business developers that are focused on multiple markets. And they might not respond as swiftly to market changes in China or to decisions that have to be made that have been brought up by distributors or TPs, as somebody who is physically on the ground and explains clearly what are the priorities and where decisions have to be made quickly. So let's explore all of this in more detail. Now, understanding consumer behavior in China is not straightforward and can be also quite nuanced. For example, a product that is popular in Shanghai may not resonate in Chengdu because of cultural differences, local tastes, etc. By having the local employees, businesses gain immediate access to these insights. Local teams can conduct effective, efficient market research, provide feedback that allows for adjustments to products and marketing strategies in real time. And this agility, this flexibility is critical, ensuring that your offerings are relatable and appealing to the Chinese consumers. And ultimately, why are we doing this? Because we really do want to have market acceptance, we want to have market success, and ultimately we want to grow and scale like so many other companies that are out there. But if you look at the way many of these companies have started, is that yes, they went with distributors first who didn't have high levels of clientele and focused on them 100%, and then they hired people. You're now working with distributors that have incredible amounts of clientele and cannot place their full focus or won't even donate a team or designate a team solely to work on your account. So you have to expect that things will be slower. Local personnel also play a critical role in navigating the regulatory landscape in China. The country has a unique array of regulations that vary not only by industry, but also by province. Just today, in fact, we found that we have a client in Chengzhou who would like to change their corporate structure, and Chengzhou is not following the updated company laws that were published in July of 2024, and they're doing things a little bit differently. So it's just to show that even though you will have these updated regulations that should be implemented throughout China, you will have these slight variations on how those regulations are interpreted, right? Another example would be on labor laws concerning employee rights, working hours, benefits that can differ again from region to region. Now, local employees are familiar with these nuances and can work closely actually with government authorities to ensure this compliance. Again, there's a bit of a nuance here because you don't necessarily want a salesperson to be talking to the tax bureau when they know nothing about finance or how things won't work with the tax bureau. So there are certain things where you have to be careful about who is talking to whom within the government, but still having somebody on the ground who does that is critical. Keep in mind that government officers, bureaus, officials, they will only communicate with somebody who has a Chinese mobile number, speaks fluent Chinese. They won't talk to foreigners or anybody else. I mean, if you're a foreigner that speaks fluent Chinese, that's not a problem, but you do need to have then a local mobile number as well. Now, again, the whole point of this slide in terms of the regulatory navigation is having somebody on the ground will reduce the risk of unintended violations that could potentially lead to fines or operational disruptions. Ultimately, you want to safeguard your investment, and it doesn't mean that these third parties are always doing things in your interest. Building relationships. Now, everybody, well, I hope everybody would know that in the Chinese business culture, the concept of guanxi is the network of relationships among people, which plays an essential role in doing business. Relationships are often more powerful than formal agreements and contracts. So again, having people on the ground fostering this stronger communication and connection with these stakeholders is vital. These local team members or this local person that you hire can attend social gatherings, build rapport with customers, with suppliers, with officials, with third parties that you engage with. And obviously then talk business, right? And negotiate and move from there. So establishing trust, credibility, sometimes even friendship in these relationships is lucrative to success. And you also have to think when you're working with third parties, they're working in your interest, but not full time, that they may not make the effort, right? For them, they will probably have a business model per client, and anything that requires extra work outside of that little business model or, operating procedure or standard process, they will consider an obstacle and might not then even handle it. Like, for example, talking to an officer or talking to somebody else where it requires a face-to-face meeting. Efficient operations is for me the key, because I think ultimately we all need to be reminded of the fact that, again, third parties have multiple clients and they're not going to spend full time on you and your business. When you're dealing with China, your goal is to be as efficient as possible, particularly because you are in a fast-paced environment, right? So having a local presence enhances your operational capabilities automatically. The idea is that your local representative, your local employee, or if you have multiple people, those team members can coordinate logistics, they can align supply chains, they can pivot if you need to change logistics providers or other third-party warehousing management systems, and they can do this in real time. Okay, versus waiting for your HQ to coordinate a business trip to come on the ground to figure out what needs to be fixed. Okay, having this local team where you do need to give a certain level of trust and freedom and flexibility to make decisions is that they will then make these quicker decisions if any unexpected challenges arise, right? For example, we had a client who chose a logistics provider who had warehousing as well, and discovered that they subcontracted the warehousing to another party without informing the client. First shipment arrived, and the subcontracted party did not know that the goods needed to be in a cooled temperature environment, and the entire container of goods was destroyed. It was glass, which then broke because of the heat of the warehouse. So it's little things like that. Luckily, they had immediately somebody on the ground who, when the container arrived, went to the warehouse, observed that there were no temperature controlled situations, and asked for immediate release, It took time. A lot of, again, like I said, a lot of the materials in the container did break. But if they would have waited for the HQ to organize a business trip to come out, it would have been a disastrous situation for them. So if there's a disruption in the supply chain due to regulatory changes or logistical challenges, the idea is that these local employees can address those issues almost immediately, minimizing any breakage or potential delays that might be caused. And this level of responsiveness is vital in maintaining customer satisfaction, operational continuity, and ultimately saving cost in case things do pop up. You also want your individuals, your team, your local team to be engaging with potentially local suppliers, negotiating terms, dealing with third parties, also negotiating terms, dealing with customers, acquiring customers, and doing this again all in real time. Having somebody on the ground ultimately does lead to better service delivery and ultimately generates cost savings as well. So those are the reasons really why you should have an on-the-ground presence versus relying on your third parties to take care of you. This is one of the main reasons that people either exit the market because they become so dissatisfied with third parties, or they don't grow as quickly or as rapidly as they thought they would. So I want to go on to then what are the triggers for utilizing the EOR services, and then ultimately understanding, you know, and we're comparing that ultimately then with establishing an entity in China. So it's important to recognize the context in which your company is operating in. Companies typically evaluate their needs based on specific triggers, such as the urgency of market entry, the nature and duration of projects, legal compliance issues, cost factors, long-term strategic intentions, and understanding these triggers is vital for making the right choice regarding which path you want to take, i.e., whether you want to utilize the employer of record service or set up a company. Keep in mind that we are still all saying that you need people on the ground to support your organization. It's just a matter of which business model then suits you. So let's look at rapid market entry. Now, in cases where companies need to enter China quickly, the employer of record services can be particularly beneficial. One of the things that I have noticed with most of my clients is that before they have even thought about a business model in entering China, they always start with hiring people because everybody does realize that they need somebody on the ground. So they allow, employer of record basically allows companies to hire employees in China without the necessity of being incorporated there. And this expedited process facilitates rapid deployment of teams to initiate operations, carrying out market entry strategies, engaging with customers without the bureaucratic delays tied to formal entity establishment and then hiring people. Now, while setting up an entity might also have a quick pathway, it often comes with a significant amount of paperwork, legal validations, regulatory approvals, which obviously could delay your market entry significantly if you're looking to hire somebody formally. Now, keep in mind that a lot of clients don't know the laws in China about employment and make the assumption that they can just hire somebody from their HQ to be based in China, and they think that's a formal employment, which it is not. Employment in China is pretty clear-cut in saying that if you are hiring an employee that is residing in China, they need to be employed by an entity that is registered in China in order for then the social insurance and housing fund contributions to be made properly, as well as for individual income tax to be paid. If you are in a situation where you do have these types of freelance contracts directly with your HQ, I would highly suggest that you review them and understand what are the pros and cons of having that. Now, when companies are embarking on short-term projects or even pilot programs, The employer of record service provides the flexibility that is often crucial in those instances. So, for example, a company is testing a new product line that where they may not want to commit to having an entity in China because basically they don't know if this product line will work or not. The employer of record service allows them to hire the local talent quickly, assess the market viability without any of the long-term commitments. Should the pilot program be successful, and the intention is then to establish a long-lasting presence in China, transitioning to a formal entity then may become necessary to obviously solidify those strategic plans. Compliance with local labor laws and regulations can also be daunting to foreign companies. The employer of record service helps mitigate the risks associated with local employment laws by the fact that you have a third party who is doing the hiring in China, and they are also then doing all of the HR related compliance, payroll, and employee benefits. And this is particularly advantageous for businesses that are unfamiliar with local arrangements. And ultimately, because they are in this period of transition or uncertainty about the market, you don't really have to have the need to study all of this. You can really rely then on this third party employment agency to do that work for you. So if a firm anticipates ongoing operations in the country and they desire that they want to have more direct control over their employees, then obviously, and they want to, I don't know, invoice and do other things through that entity, then obviously setting up a business, setting up a company, setting up an LLC will give them that autonomy to do all of that. But you always have to keep in mind that the negative to that is that they have to manage compliance of that entity, as well as then the legal obligations to maintain and run that entity. Now, like I said in the intro, cost is always a crucial consideration for everybody. Ultimately, employer of record services can often represent a more cost-effective solution for companies needing immediate hire and quick deployment. Companies can save on the overhead associated with setting up a formal company, which includes incorporation fees, ongoing administrative fees, and ultimately potentially higher operational costs. However, while establishing a business entity does involve higher initial costs, the long-term benefits of having it can be substantial. Again, having a direct presence allows for better control of operations, increased visibility and image amongst all parties that you're working with, and can ultimately lead to a more substantial market position over time. In addition to this, I do want to highlight that, and I'm basing this on Woodburn's fees. We have made the calculation that if a company is using employer of record services and they have 2 or 3 employees, the service fees associated with that would be equivalent to the starting costs and running of an actual entity. So normally when I have a client who is saying, Christina, I want to hire a third person, I want to hire a fourth person, this is usually the trigger for me to tell them, it will be more cost effective for you now to think about setting up an entity. Because you might be paying more than now for the employer of record services than you would if you were actually setting up your own company and running it. And then ultimately, you have to look at long-term strategic goals, right? If your company is still evaluating its commitment to the market, or your business plans are still tentative, then the employer of record service offers a low-risk method to gain experience and insight. On the other hand, for companies ready to make significant investments, build lasting market relationships, scale operations, establishing a formal business entity may be essential in order to achieve those goals. The approach you take can significantly impact your ability to meet your strategic aspirations. So you've got to keep all of this in mind. And obviously, once you have a formal entity, it takes almost 18 months to 2 years to close down if you go through the formal liquidation, versus just maintaining the UR. However, on the other side, we have seen a lot of clients be lazy and want to maintain the EOR service to give them less risk, showing less commitment. But what it has caused is then providing psychological instability to the employees who feel unstable and not knowing where their future is going with this company who's not even willing to set up an entity in China. So it's a balancing act, right? You want to make your employees, ultimately, they are your employees. You want to make them happy that they are investing their time and focusing on your business and how you're growing. At the same time, you're trying to reduce risk and whatnot. Generally, we have found that the employees themselves will formally come. And I use the word protest, but it's not really a protest, right? They're protesting to their employer in the fact that, are you taking this market seriously? Because we are. We're putting all of our effort into building this business for you. At a minimum, can you now set up an entity? Right? So, conclusion. Ultimately, both the employer record services and establishing an entity in China can offer unique advantages. Ultimately, what I do want to say here is that what I want to highlight more than anything is the fact that you need to have an on-the-ground presence. Somebody or a team of people who work solely for you and have your best interests in hand to grow this business versus relying on other third parties who maybe spend 20% of their week on you and not more, right? You want these people, this team that you're building, to watch over you and the investments that you're making into these parties to make sure that you've made the right decision. Don't forget, let's say you're using a marketing agency in China, right? You don't speak Chinese. You don't know if the marketing campaigns that they're generating fit with the market. You're hoping that they do. You're trusting that they do because you've signed an agreement with them. You may not even put KPIs in there about what should be generated from these marketing campaigns. Having somebody on the ground observe all of that, again, in real time, but also speaking the language is vital. I had one beverage company who ultimately noticed social media campaigns of their product. And the marketing company had even put the wrong, how do you say, so it was beverage, right? And you have different container sizes, had put a container size that didn't even exist in their portfolio of products, right? Probably because they were copying and pasting. So it's really important to evaluate having somebody on the ground who supports you in that manner. And then how do you support that individual in terms of proper employment and whether you need a business entity, and ultimately what are your long-term corporate objectives, right? Basically, you want to align your approach so that you can effectively navigate the complexities of what is happening in real time in market. And ultimately, you want to position your company for the most sustainable success, but also that you are continuously growing and scaling. So to finish today's presentation, and ultimately, let me just go back to the point of whether it's an EOR or a business entity. This is really an internal decision, looking at the various factors I highlighted. Cost is always going to be the biggest one. I think commitment level is also another big one. Setting up an entity is a huge commitment. Setting up a subsidiary anywhere in the world is a huge commitment. Completely understand that, which is why I think most people go for the EOR business model initially before taking the plunge and then going with the business entity. So just to finish off, how Woodburn can help you on your journey. Our company specializes in the employer of record services. So we do act as an employment agency where we can then facilitate the hiring process for local employees swiftly and in compliance with local regulations. Small disclaimer, we are not a headhunting or recruitment firm. So the goal first would be to find the people, but then we are more than happy to hire them. If you're considering establishing a formal business entity, our team can guide you through the setup process, ensuring that you meet all the legal and regulatory requirements. Our expertise in navigating the intricate regulatory landscape will also help to mitigate risks associated with compliance and help you focus on your core business activities. We also provide, as you've seen throughout this presentation, tailored market entry strategies which align with your objectives and your goals. And finally, we can always provide ongoing support and advisory services with any challenges that you may be faced with in market. So I hope today's presentation was useful to you. We have recorded this presentation. It will be going up on our YouTube channel as well as on our website. So you're more than, I'd be more than pleased if you would share it with colleagues or with other people who are interested in heading into the Chinese market. So again, that they can build up their knowledge level and gain insight about what they can and cannot do, but more importantly, what they should be doing in order to be able to grow and scale their business. I always like to finish my presentations with this quote. Remember, entering and operating in China can be a rewarding journey with the right preparation and strategies. So I always say knowledge is power. Build up that knowledge level that you are making the right strategic decisions for your company in China. No questions have popped in, but if there are any questions, please do put them in. In the meantime, I will let you go and I wish you a pleasant day. Take care and goodbye.